Okay, very good. Then we'll get started. Great. Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. We love seeing you every Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Rochon, the president of the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. Also on our staff on the call are Ben Van Camp and Jennifer Stevens. So they are supporting this effort today. Today's chat is about human resources and what we need to know about best practices as we bring our employees back, hire new employees, and what we need to do to keep our staff and our customers safe. So all about best practices. We have Amy Can from HR ROI in Portsmouth and Jermaine Moore from the Mars Hill Group, and I'll be introducing them in a little bit. So housekeeping as usual, we're going to keep you on mute. Please use the chat function to ask questions. If we do get Zoom bombed, which hasn't happened yet, thankfully, then Ben will close the meeting immediately and we'll reschedule. All Chamber Chat live events are recorded and will be posted on our Facebook and our YouTube channel. And also you can link to them on our website. So the way this works is that we ask our guests to speak. Amy's going to go first and then Jermaine. And they'll speak for a little while, and then we open it up to Q&A. So Ben is managing the Q&A, and he'll be our moderator. So just make sure that you enter your questions through the chat function, and when we get to the Q&A part, then we'll read those for you. So I want to give you a little bit of news that's happening with the Chamber. So you hear from Jen all the time out on our social and through Source. We are now up to 54 restaurants that are permitted to open with outdoor dining, and we know about 40 of them that are already open and operating out in their expanded sidewalk areas or creative areas, not yet in the public realm, though we're working on that. We have 27 retailers that we're aware of that are now open. And if any of you were watching the governor's press conference yesterday, you saw that he's going to open up pretty much everything by the end of June, assuming that our stats continue to look positive. As long as people are social distancing and wearing masks and washing your hands and doing everything that you can to keep those numbers going down, then we get to open for the most part by the end of the month. So that's pretty exciting. Lodging, we now have 10 of our local lodging properties that are open. For those that have outdoor access, like the Port Inn, for example, can have 100% capacity. Those that have indoor hallways where guests could be encountering them, then those are only at 50% capacity. But we're hoping that, again, as those numbers, as the COVID numbers keep going down, that we'll be able to see some loosening up of those openings. So visit goportsmouthnh.com. There is a section for all opening businesses, anybody that we're aware of. It's updated frequently. Please use that as a resource. Also on portsmouthcollaborative.org, they're all there as well. So if you look under COVID-19, you'll see that the same information. So we're excited that the beaches are open. Pools and water parks are going to be opening very soon. Amusements are going to open up very soon. And you saw that the governor has announced that he will lift the stay-at-home order as of June 15th, next Monday, and going into a safe-at-home philosophy, so that if you are at risk or if you have any underlying issues, health issues, then stay safe at home if you can. And but it's all good news. Everybody's done a good job. Congratulations. We're starting to open up. So for those of you who can apply for the Main Street Fund, you know that today is the deadline. You've got to get your final applications in. If you put your pre-applications in on May 29th, you have to get your final applications in today. Please get those in. And for those of you who are nonprofits, the Nonprofit Relief Fund, the guidelines are now open. The links are now open for applications. So please get in there, get your applications in. That's a $60 million fund that's being funded through the state from the CARES Act funds. So please get in there. Reminder that we'll be opening up for questions once our guests have all spoken, so please use that chat function. We're going to start with Amy Can. Amy is the managing partner of HR ROI in Portsmouth. She's been in the human resources field for over 20 years. She's a senior certified HR professional and a certified safety management specialist. She's a consultant for organizations in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine. Also teaches at UNH. Her education includes an MBA and a graduate degree in organizational leadership. She's currently attending the Maine School of Law in your spare time, I guess, Amy. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us. We unmuted. I can't hear you yet.
There, I think we're...
Yay, we're good to go. Thank you.
Yeah, great, so I'm gonna screen share. Ben, looks like the screen sharing's not open at the moment. So what I want to do is use the next 10 minutes to give you a quick overview of the 4 biggest broad issues that I see with companies, clients, and give you some resources. Can everyone see my screen? Just say Chamber Chat Live. Okay, great. So these are the 4 biggest areas that I see as problems, and they're extremely broad, I realize. And I know we'll have a chance to answer some questions later, so please, jump in on any of these topics that stands out to you. But number 1 is obviously safety, is protecting employees, customers, visitors, and that's the right thing to do. And there's also liability attached to that if you don't, which we'll talk about a little later. That's one topic. Another one is just legal compliance and privacy. Department of Labor, is administering the CARES Act for the sick leave and the extended FMLA leave. The EOC has given us a lot of guidance around testing and loosened up restrictions on some of the privacy and confidentiality, but still you need to respect confidentiality. And then OSHA has given us a lot of guidance, and we'll talk about that. And they are referring to the CDC a lot, but they have their own specific guidance too. So we'll talk briefly about that, a little bit about workers' comp and liability. And then at the end, employer rights, like there's a lot of things we have to do. What can we do? What are our options as employers? So it's going to be a super quick overview of these topics, but you'll have a chance to ask questions later, but I wanted to just give you some resources. So OSHA has experienced about 1,660 complaints right now in workplaces because of failure to provide precautions and safety guidelines for employees. So know that there is some requirement, aside from universal guidelines that the governor's issued, there's also requirements under OSHA to make sure you're providing a safe environment for employees to work. They are receiving complaints and they are starting investigations. They referred, I think about a third of those or a quarter of those for actual inspections. So there's 2 main regulations under OSHA. It's the PPE standard around respirators. That's more just for healthcare workers and that kind of field there, very specific. And then there's the general duty clause where that catches the rest of us. So if you're not in healthcare, there's still a specific duty to make sure that your employees have protection, so that there's barriers, that there's social distancing in place, that there's masks if appropriate, that you're controlling the exposure. And we'll get into workers' comp a little bit later on, but you're trying to create a neutral environment so that you're not increasing the risk of them contracting COVID-19 in the workplace as opposed to being out in their personal life. And that's kind of where workers' comp comes into it. But OSHA's got a ton of resources here. And I don't know if you can share this link later on, Valerie or Ben or Jen, but I'm happy to share this. And it has embedded links in there for everyone. But you can go right to OSHA.gov's website and you can look at learn more, and they walk you through a ton of questions and answers and resources. So, and they produce these tip of the day. And number 1 tip of the day is encouraging employees to bring unsafe work conditions, meaning COVID-19 conditions, to their supervisors. So they are encouraging a lot of employee involvement in the process. And that's where whistleblower complaints are coming down, because OSHA's saying if you can't talk to your employer about it, then call us about it. So that's part of the safety aspect there, lots of guidance, plus part of the legal compliance piece. So the governor's site has a lot of great resources. I noticed this yesterday. They have a request to test spot, because I've heard from people that their doctors are telling them that they shouldn't bother testing and just stay home with symptoms. but they don't have to rely on their doctor's referral. They can go to request COVID-19 test here on the governor's site, and they can actually walk through the process to request a test. And if you click here, it walks you through that process. And you can look at scheduling, you look at location. So I think it's a good resource for people to know about. And also on the governor's site, there are his emergency orders and also the Stay at Home 2000 or 2.0, which I noticed has a timeline too. So you can see what's going to be happening down the road and when they'll start loosening up other regulations for other industries. But the whole time along there, they're reminding you that universal guidelines should be applied. It's a complicated mix because they're guidelines, but there's a lot of words in there about must and should. And the Attorney General's office is looking into complaints. When they get complaints from typically police offices, police stations, people are calling the police, making a complaint. That goes to the governor's or the Attorney General's office, and then they're investigating. So it's interesting, like you don't necessarily have to, but if you don't, there's a consequence kind of thing. So I recommend that everyone stick to the universal guidelines as much as possible. There's multiple reasons why. I think one of the big reasons would be that you're sticking with the recommended precautions so you can protect yourself from potentially workers' comp or any customer or visitor complaints if they were to file a negligence claim against you in court, that you weren't taking proper precautions and they got COVID-19 in your location. You can fall back on the fact that you used all the universal guidelines and you can protect yourself in that realm. So there's some legal element there, and the same thing applies to workers' comp. So the governor has a really good site here with everything really combined there, and there's additional information too for people to look at to find out what's going on with COVID-19 in their locations. So that's one other resource. Again, the timeline helps us break down and see what we're going to expect and what's already happened. And then CDC has a great website as well, and there's a tremendous amount of information. So that's why I wanted to provide the links here. Just hopefully you could drill down into what would be most applicable to you. And so the CDC is driving a lot of the recommendations for the states and OSHA. So they have how you clean and disinfect, how to protect your workers, what do you do if someone comes in with symptoms, all those kinds of things. There's resources there through the CDC. So it goes back to just providing that safe environment there. And later on, the liability element that's on my list of concerns for employers. So I'm sure this has generated questions so far, but I'm going to keep going right now, and then hopefully we can connect at the end. So aside from safety and how that ties into liability for employers too, there's also some legal compliance around the Department of Labor is administering the paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA. And here's a poster just to kind of reinforce those requirements that, if someone's sick, stay at home, has symptoms, seeking diagnosis, there is the 2 weeks of paid sick leave that employers are required to provide. And then it breaks down if it's related to caring for someone who's home, who's sick under quarantine, or because of childcare, up to 2 weeks of 80 hours of paid sick leave as well. That's at 2/3 as opposed to the 100% for if it's the actual employee that's sick. And then the other piece of it is the expanded FMLA, which gives them up to 10 additional weeks. And that's related to childcare, school closures only. A lot of people I talk to say, well, I'm small, so I'm going to apply for an exemption. The exemption is not quite that easy. It only applies to childcare issues too. So know that the paid sick leave, the 80 hours, for the worker, that's not open for exemption. It's just the childcare issues. And there's a couple of standards under 50 and under 25. So, and one of the reasons because of the limited exceptions there, or exemptions there, is because there's tax credits for employer reimbursement. And you can go to the IRS website for details on that, how to report that on your quarterly tax returns. So that's something else to take into consideration, whether or not someone has triggered getting the paid sick leave or the childcare. And I know that camps are starting to open up, and there's some childcare that are open, but it's still very complex issues. So you may still see some of this. So be aware of that. And if you can easily go to the site and Google Department of Labor COVID-19, this all comes up very easily. Another component is the EOC, and they're looking at it from a couple standpoints. So looking at it from a discriminatory standpoint, to make sure people aren't taking advantage of this time to let people go who are have protected class criteria, or or address harassment, of course, too, but also to address any disability issues and what you can and cannot do under the ADA, because typically checking someone's temperature when they come into work would be evasive and you wouldn't be able to do it. But they've expanded this, as everyone knows, it's a national pandemic, so it's much different than we've ever experienced. So a lot of these laws have loosened up on, the regulations have loosened up on how they look at that. So the EOC has tremendous resources as well to go over what you can and what you cannot do. And they have a great Q&A section, just like the Department of Labor site. The DOL has a great Q&A, and so does the EOC. So you can go to their site and you can often get your question answered there. So those are always resources I point people towards. This is the one I wanted to just point out to everyone too. The Attorney General, this is an opinion that was issued a couple weeks back, and he talks about workers' comp. The question was about whether or not people could sue for COVID-19, and hopefully you can see this okay. And you can go to that site, and the questions that were asked were around these two questions here. Hopefully everyone can see that. Does state law provide liability protection for employers from employee personal injury claims? And does state law limit an employee's ability to seek workers' comp benefits? So the first question is, yes, I mean, employee personal injury claims do fall under workers' comp. Employees can't sue someone in court because it's a no-fault protection for workers' compensation, unless there's gross negligence or gross misconduct on the side of the employer or employee. So employees cannot sue employers, but they can file for workers' compensation, which is the second part of that question. And what the Attorney General explained to people is that typically, it's no, because if someone catches the flu or cold, there's no way to pin down like that kind of thing. But with COVID-19, it's a little more specific. And this is a memo that you may or may not want to read, but the bottom line at the bottom really goes into liability for employers, and it gets down to creating a neutral risk. And I think he talks about that somewhere in the middle here. That last line that's underlined, if you can see that, says a risk greater than to which the general public was exposed. And that's where those universal guidelines come into play, because if you're using those, then you should be neutralizing the risk, which means that you're not creating a risk greater than which the general public is exposed to already. Just going to the grocery store getting gas. So then your workers' comp claim wouldn't go forward. However, if you're not following guidelines or something, unfortunately unique comes up, then that's where that risk might, be created that's greater than the general public exposure. And that's where there's going to be liability and risk for workers' compensation. And I talked to different companies, and we have an array of clients across many industries. And the vast majority are following the universal guidelines, with the exception sometimes of masks. They're using social distancing instead. So, again, it's something that you want to use, that universal guideline. You want to use that to your advantage to protect you from workers' comp claims or any outside claim in civil court for negligence for someone contracting COVID-19 and going to your workplace and contracting it there and suing you because of their medical or the harm that happens to them, or God forbid if they pass away, their family can sue you on behalf. So that's when it comes back to really the risk element that you want to make sure you're controlling with the universal guidelines. I know they're complicated and not easy, but I do encourage everyone to consider that other impact, not just the safety, but also liability. So I know I'm speaking like a million things at once here. I probably would need to wrap up in a second. Unemployment, I think everyone understands this. It's more broad than the paid sick leave. But just to know, I talked to New Hampshire Employment Security recently, and I'm actually starting to work with Maine Department of Labor, helping them actually adjudicate claims next week. And so I've been talking to New Hampshire, and they said if someone's declining to return to work and they're not sick, there's no other circumstance that you're aware of, then you should notify them. You can call your local office, or you can go online and file a new eligibility form to report the fact that they turned down employment. So this kind of gets into the employer rights. Like, what can you do? Someone can't stay on unemployment indefinitely unless there are specific situations here that they've been quarantined for a valid reason, or they're caring for someone and they provide documentation to that effect, or the child care, that's unfortunately an ongoing problem. But if someone's situation doesn't fall into that, then you can report them for failing to return to work. And there is some unemployment fraud happening already. So just be aware you're not at a complete loss for options there. So that was a super quick overview. Hope I didn't go over my time, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that, and then also share this presentation too.
Amy, it's Ben. We did have one question kind of come in as you were going through your stuff there. The question is, how is the extended FMLA being handled through the summer? The additional 10 weeks will expire today for most parents caring for children.
So if it's someone who's already had the 10 weeks of leave, it's a whole 12-week, collectively the first 2 weeks were unpaid and the 10 weeks were paid. If someone's exhausted that, there is no protection. If they're unable to return to work, they're either resigning or terminating them for a failure to come back to work. They would be eligible for unemployment. At that point, they could file for unemployment, but you don't have to continue to keep them on. That protection is exhausted after that 12-week period, which again is the 2-week waiting plus the 10 weeks of the 2/3 pay.
Great.
But that with one caveat, if they have protected class factors too, disability, other elements, that's one consideration. And then the other one, of course, is whether or not they can work from home too. And if not, then there is no other protection for them to keep their employment.
Another question came in to, what if you return to work and wear a mask, but your coworkers opt not to wear a mask and you do not feel safe? Any guidance on that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So what OSHA recommends is that you talk to your supervisor about that, and you start with your boss, your HR person, and or owner. You go up the chain and ask them to either make a change, social distancing, workplace barriers, something else, or look at requiring the masks. If you're still unsafe at working and you have a risk factor, you can certainly consider going out applying for unemployment. You can also consider calling OSHA, making a complaint. You can also consider calling a police station, making a complaint, because they are investigating situations too. I think they're focusing more on the orders as far as whether businesses are open or not versus, but they are looking at any unsafe conditions. So if an employer was completely ignoring any precautions, that's an option. So I think I would start with my supervisor in HR though and explain your situation, and hopefully they're able to help you.
Those are the only questions for now that I have.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Amy. And Amy, I did think that you said that you were going to give us access to your presentation,
Yes.
that were about Safe Harbor to Taylor, and the questions and answers in that are particularly of interest to us. We've been working on that with our in Concord because people are concerned about that. People are very concerned about being sued or workers' comp, or what is their liability level, and if you do everything that you possibly can and somebody still gets sick, what is my liability? And so we've been working on some safe harbor legislation. So I'd love to see that letter. I hadn't seen that yet. So thank you for sharing that.
I'll send it to you shortly.
That would be great. And then as a heads up, I just want to share that the Business and Economic Affairs Department, Commissioner Caswell, is working with the New Hampshire Department of Employment Security to develop a regional jobs board for those who are collecting unemployment, because as we know that unemployment federal subsidy of $600 ends in July, and we want to make sure that people have as much access to the jobs that are out there as possible. So BEA and NHES are working on that regional jobs board, and we will share that as soon as we have a link to it. So, so that folks can start applying. So thank you. We talked to, thank you, Amy. We'll come back to you with Q&A as soon as we hear from Jermaine. So thank you. And my head is spinning, by the way, from all of that you just shared with us. That was
Yeah, I know. I hate to leave anything
so
out.
thank you. We will probably, I'm sure there'll be some questions. I did say earlier that some of our pools and water parks might be open, and Ben updated me and said that the Pierce Island public pool is not going to open this year. The city has made that decision, so just FYI. Our next guest is Jermaine Moore, who is the founder of the Mars Hill Group, with over 20 years experience developing leaders and building highly engaged, high-performing teams within various industries. With a passion for development, Jermaine partners with organizational leaders to discover their own path to higher achievement and greater organizational impact. Jermaine's areas of expertise include leadership development and coaching, diversity and inclusion, which is why we asked him to join us today, team development, culture assessment and development, communication training, change management, and workforce planning. He's an active trainer and SME for the University of New Hampshire's Professional Development and Training Program, leading courses in leadership, workforce planning, and diversity inclusion. He also serves as the Diversity Director for the Human Resources State Council of New Hampshire. So, Jermaine, thank you. My goodness, thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so very much for having me, and thank you for thinking of me. I'm very pleased to spend a couple of minutes with business and industry leaders talking about this very important, timely topic of racial equality. Valerie sent me a message saying what we're interested in is helping businesses understand how to treat people of color or what to do about some of the things that we're seeing going on right now. So I don't have a whole lot of time. So I'll share a couple, I think, key things that I've seen companies do very, very successfully, and I hope to see more companies do. Because I believe we're at this inflection point within our community where there is a change ahead. And I think companies, nimble companies and flexible companies need to be ready to change with the times. So I've seen companies do a very, very good job of taking this time to make themselves more aware. It really starts with awareness and understanding, one, personally, our own prejudices, our own racism, to be blunt, and even our own biases. So it starts there. And I think this is a great time where people are in companies are taking a step back and examining, where do we stand on racial equality issues or racial equity issues? I was talking to a couple of companies this week, so you've seen a lot of organizations send out statements, saying that we are against, racism. We're all for racial equality. We condemn, for instance, the death of George Floyd, and we're going to continue to work to be a culture or a company that espouses these types of values. But what we've also seen is a bit of backlash for companies making these statements, but their employees calling them out because that is not who they are. So a bit of word of caution. I think it's very important for your people to understand where you stand on these issues, but it's just as important for you to be authentic about it, because you will get called out by your people. If this is something that you haven't been committed to, then your people are going to let you know, and sometimes in a very public, sometimes embarrassing way we've seen a bit lately. But that doesn't mean you can't take a stand. It doesn't mean that you can't be, from this point on, committed to racial equality within your businesses. So it starts with a little bit of awareness. When I do coaching, I have to understand where you are and where you're trying to go before we make a plan to get there. And awareness helps us do that. We start personally. Where am I? What are some of my beliefs that may need to change or that I may need to adjust? And then we ask the hard questions about our businesses and the business that we run. What is our culture communicating to our employees? I have a couple questions that I think can get you started. One is, what is the experience for minorities within your organization? What is standing in the way of all of your employees feeling welcomed, valued, heard, and respected? And what don't we realize that we're doing? So sometimes, like us individually, we have blind spots, and our companies, our business may also have blind spots. So trying to figure out what are some of the things that we may be missing. So that self-reflection is very important. Commitment from your leaders is obviously very, very important. And along with an awareness, some of the things that you can do is have a dialogue with your people. I'm not sure how diverse your organizations are, but this is a time to listen. And we quickly want to jump to what can we do? Well, the first thing we can do is take a step back and don't say anything and listen to your people. I was at a dialogue session with a company on Wednesday, had about 25 people on site, another 25, 30 people dial in. We were all physically distanced. I had to wear a mask the whole time. It was the worst. I hated it. But it was very interesting how quickly, and it was a space created for people to share how they were feeling, because people are feeling very frustrated, angry, and hurt by some of the things that they've been seeing over these past few months. And it was very interesting how quickly people wanted to move from hearing about it to what are we going to do about it. And we can't skip that very, very important step of listening and understanding, because the more we know, the better plans we can put in place to address some of these issues. But we got to have an idea of the breadth and the depth of these issues before we can start acting on them. So that awareness is key. Self-awareness, your cultural awareness, and getting a sense of what your employees are feeling. And don't rush that process. And then after that, it becomes, how do we act? And we can do that a couple of ways. One, we can train our people on what diverse and inclusivity means and what that looks like as a culture. We can train them on unconscious biases and really help them reflect. Because most people, they're unconscious for a reason, they're implicit for a reason, because they are hidden from us. So helping people understand how that affects how we interact and relate with other people is a step in the right direction. So that type of training. Also equipping your people on how to confront these issues when they come up. What do they do in your business when a coworker says something racially insensitive? Should I speak up? So even as a corporation or as a business, to make those expectations clear and equip your people to deal with these issues as they come, I think is very, very important. And also focus on your leaders, because if your leaders aren't bought in, then none of this is going anywhere. And I do want to remind you that although this is the right thing to do right now, to focus on these types of issues, that reason, that why behind some of these initiatives that you may have around diversity, inclusion, and racial equality may not be enough for your people. But I will tell you this, you can make a strong business case, and there's research out there that goes back years. McKinsey & Company did a fantastic paper, and they did multiple papers on what it means to be a diverse and inclusive company and how it affects the bottom line. So my message to you is that this is good for business, because diverse teams, diverse companies outperform those that are not diverse. They are more innovative. Their stock, if you're a larger company, stock prices are better. Profit margins are better. Culture, what it feels like to work in these organizations, are better for everyone, not just your minorities, but everyone within your organization. So make sure you're connecting these initiatives to business outcomes, because you are a business, right? And that's why you're in business, and you can make a strong case to do some of those things. So those are some quick things that you can do to really start to raise awareness within your organizations about why this work is important, and some of the small things you can do to take some baby steps, because it does seem overwhelming, particularly if we take that macro look at the country and think of how are we going to get through this. But we all have our own circle of influence, right? So it starts with ourselves, with our homes, with our businesses, then our communities. And if we do that, we'll change the country. So I'll stop there and just I'll leave it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Oh, and by the way, if you don't know how to do these things, seek help. There are people out there that are willing to facilitate these types of conversations for you, that assess your culture and get a sense for where you are. Outside people can come in with an objective look at your business, and also some of your people may be more comfortable sharing their true feelings with somebody that is not their leader. Hopefully you have a culture that people can speak up freely without fear of repercussions. But if you get a sense that people are not feeling safe, don't hesitate to lean on external folks that can help you through that process. So I'll leave it there, and I'll wait for any questions that you may have about any of the things, or even some things I may not have touched on.
Sure, Jermaine, this is a question I have from me, not from anyone else. But I looked at all these statements from businesses over the last couple weeks here, and to me that's easy, right? Anyone can put up a black square and make their logo white, and they can put out a press release. Like, that's pretty easy stuff to do. How do you hold these businesses accountable for those next steps that aren't as maybe as flashy or as easy to just put out there in a press release?
That is a great question, Ben. And you're right. It's very easy to put out a statement. Change doesn't come without hard work and a continuous, sustained effort to make a change. Is very hard. Any change is hard for all organizations, particularly we're talking about changing culture. So it takes a lot of intentional hard work to make some changes. And you do that by having a very robust D&I plan, and have goals around it, goals that you can measure, and start holding people accountable to those goals, like any other key performance indicator in a business, right? We have hiring metrics, we have financial metrics, we have all kinds of production metrics, and we use those metrics, that data, to help drive our behavior. So one of the things we can do is by having some concrete goals, be explicit about what you're trying to do as an organization, and talk about them just as much as you talk about some of the other goals that you have. Because as soon as you make them public, people are going to start holding you accountable to them. So great question. I think that's where we start. But you got to be authentic, because people will call you out on it if you're not living what you're saying.
Yeah, and I was really heartened to see some of those companies, they posted pictures of their staff at the protest, and they took it to that next level already. Whereas others, they just did that press release, and there was no follow-up, at least that I saw. So
Right. I was at that protest I was asked to speak at that Unite rally on Sunday, and my message was one of unite, hope and love. It was from a personal place. But I pretty much said the same thing. Change is very hard. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. But even that 3-hour time, and it was a fairly nice day, the crowd started to thin out. Like, we can't even sit together for 3 hours and listen to people, right? That's even too hard for some of us. But I don't want you to be discouraged. Even though it's hard, it's worthwhile work to do in just about every way you can think about it. It's worthwhile work.
So, Jermaine, thank you so much. And those are, I appreciate your clarification on some of that as well. That's really great.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to ask you is, if you ask people if they're racist, they will typically say no.
Yeah.
So, and I've read recently that racism is a spectrum, and we all probably fall somewhere on that spectrum.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to be introspective and we're trying to figure out where we are on that spectrum, what would be some of the first questions we would ask ourselves? Can you share that with us? Is there a resource that you'd like to point us to? How would I now sit down introspectively and say, okay, where am I falling here? And from there, then I can keep going. But I need to understand where I am on that spectrum first.
I think that's a great question, and I want to say something that may come across controversial. It is a spectrum, and if you don't have any racist tendencies growing up in our culture, you are an exception to the rule. And that doesn't mean that you're not a good person, but we all grew up with some beliefs that we have to fight against at times, and sometimes it's our natural response to things that kind of say, who we are, communicate who we are. So one, being honest with ourselves is very, very difficult. It takes a level of humility, I think, to look at yourself courageously and say, this may be an issue that I have, and I want to do something about it. I'll send you a link to Eddie Moore Jr. has a great, Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., no relation, although I wish we were related. He's a brilliant man. Wish we shared the same genes, but he has a great resource. It's called the 21-Day Challenge. And in that, I'll send that link. And he has things that you can read, things that you can listen to, from podcasts to documentaries, and even some self-reflection questions where we start to answer, where we can get a sense for where we are. So I'll send that link to you, and I think it's great to share.
That would be awesome. That would be a great start for us. We just need a little pathway, a little hand holding as we start down the pathway. So I appreciate that you're willing to share that with us. That'd be great.
No problem.
And any other best resources that you have. And I understand the Mars Hill Group is one of those best resources. I understand that. But if there are any other resources that can also start us down the path, if you can share those, we will share them out there. So I truly appreciate that.
That was actually one of the questions that we received from Marianne, who I believe is at the New Hampshire Art Association. Was curious about DEI trainings and who are some good places to start with that in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah. Well, I hate to shamelessly plug my business, but that's what we do. We do that training. But there are many very qualified, excellent trainers out there who do a fantastic job. But the Mars Hill Group can help you with those types of initiatives if you're interested in just starting this journey in your organization, and just having really creating that awareness right now. I will tell you that it's all very sensitive, even in now where I think a lot of people are on board. I would tell you, if you consider doing D&I training, best practice is to make it a voluntary training. People don't like to feel forced to go to these things. But if you can make the case of why it could be important to them personally, why it's important to the business, I think you'll find more people raising their hand and saying, yes, I want to be a part of this work. So just a suggestion that whether you go through me or someone else, I think it's great that you offer it, and to make it voluntary, it tends to go a long way.
Okay. Another question that came in that was directed towards you. They were curious if there's any particular language that they could use in their hiring and job descriptions that welcome more diverse applicants. They already have like the kind of standard equal opportunity paragraph. They're looking for something that might draw in a more diverse group.
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things that we may not be realizing that we are doing is inadvertently turning off marginalized or minority candidates by the way our job descriptions are written. And in training, we talk a little bit about the power of language and what we tend to communicate without even realizing that we're using kind of coded language to attract a certain person. And it's because we're writing it from our own perspective, right? And so I'm writing it from my perspective, Ben, you may be writing a job description from your perspective, but there are certain words that will turn off some people and turn on others. So I don't know if I have just a quick and easy 3 things to pay attention to, but I will tell you this: if you are looking at your job description with an eye towards, am I using biased language? Am I unintentionally excluding a certain group of people by the language that I use or the picture that I'm painting? That's a great start, because I think we don't realize how often that happens. And as a business, we can look at all of our systems and all of our processes. And this may not just be a race thing, but even in gender. So in HR, it's something that I look up at is how even performance reviews, you'll see that for women, they use a certain language or certain words to describe women. And those words can have a negative connotation. And for men, they use different words. So for women, for men, it could be assertive. For women, it's aggressive, right? And so even looking at those types of systems that we may have we're unwittingly supporting, a discriminatory environment. They're very, very subtle. But I think once you open your eyes to how this can happen, you start to pick up on some of these subtle things in your processes and in your systems, even in your business, in your hiring practices as well.
One thing that, as you were speaking, kind of came to my mind is, oftentimes I see those equal opportunity paragraphs like buried down in fine print at the bottom. It's like with other duties assigned,
Yeah.
tucked away down there. I just think even putting it more front and center for folks, putting it right up top would be a great start.
I agree, and I will tell you this: that I do generational kind of training and workforce training, and talking about generational differences. There are very few differences, but I will tell you a difference that I'm seeing. The younger generation, as you try to attract the best and the brightest people, they're looking for these types of things in the businesses that they work for. They want to see companies who treat people with respect, socially conscious. Don't be surprised if you get an interview question is how did you treat your employees during COVID-19? Talking about what you did there, and how did you respond to the George Floyd murder or some variation of that? Because a lot of this younger generation tend to be socially conscious, and they're looking for a place where they feel that they can belong. So something to keep in mind too, as you do this work, is going to really help attract the best and the brightest as well. I'm not sure what businesses you guys run or own, but I would tell you our businesses is only as good as the people that work for us, and we want the best and the brightest.
Great.
Do we have any more questions, Ben?
Yeah, we did have to jump back to Amy, we had some more HR related questions. So I'm going to kind of pop Amy back up here, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself. So it sounds like somebody's getting ready to sort of reopen their doors, looking to get some people rehired. They're curious, are there any OSHA, ADA, or other regulations or restrictions, and the best way to go about seeing if any of their employees are in a high-risk category that they need to be aware of, and how can they go about doing that? Oh, hang on, Amy, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. All right, good, thanks. Yes, you have to be really careful you don't presume anything though, because you can't make someone take more precautions because they're high risk. That would get into the Americans with Disabilities Act, and potentially a violation there of being discriminatory if you're really trying to help people. So it's really a conversation, and there's just this term called interactive process. The ADA started hearing about that a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, and that's what you need to have is an interactive process and say, Ben, I understand that you have mentioned that you have some higher risk factors, and what concerns do you have, and what can we do to make sure you're feeling comfortable coming back? And then you have that conversation. Ben may say, well, I just want to make sure that my desk is really is further away from other people, or maybe I really like to be able to work in this office over here if that's possible, just to be further away from other people. So I have one client who's done that for someone coming back who is diabetic and was very concerned. So they moved her from a smaller office with a couple of people to one of their conference rooms, and that'll be where she'll work. So it's having that conversation to ask them, what they see as a concern. You may be surprised what they say, and their request might not be that much of a burden at all. If they come back and Ben says, well, I need this and this, I really want the CEO's office and this, then you look at whether that's a reasonable accommodation or not, whether there's undue hardship. And I talked to the EOC the other day, one of the inspectors we're going to do some education together, and she said that if they're not having any problem with their high risk, say diabetic, then doesn't kick into the ADA, per se. There's not all those protections. It's a very fine line though, because if someone's diabetic, it certainly can be a higher risk, and their doctor might state that yes, it is an ADA issue, and it's really hard to pinpoint is or not, because technically it's an ADA issue if you're having a major life activity that's affected by your disease. And if your disease is under control, it's not affecting a major life activity, then technically you don't have the ADA protection. But we're seeing that doctors are more inclined to say, yes, this is affecting a major life activity for them. So the ADA will probably kick in more often than not now, but it's going back to that interactive discussion there, and whether their request is reasonable and whether it creates undue hardship. The EOC website talks about undue hardship right now, where they're more sensitive to the fact that a lot of companies have lost revenue. And undue hardship has two components. One is financial, one is operational difficulty. So they recognize that financial difficulty right now may be a real thing for a lot of companies where, just 6 months ago, it wouldn't have been an undue hardship. So they're aware of that, and also operational difficulty may still be a problem because you're operating with a smaller staff, or you can't only bring in so many people. There's restrictions. So there's probably more cases where it's undue hardship now, but you still want to make sure really, really careful. And if you're not sure, talking to an attorney or a consultant through it to make sure you're understanding what the law is. There's plenty of attorneys out there that can walk through it with you to make sure you don't end up with a lawsuit. And that's ultimately what we want to avoid, is that you're not creating legal risk for yourself. And you also want to make sure you're allowing the person to come back to work fairly. And typically you need that person back because they're an important part of the company, or they're an important resource for you. So it's starting with just asking questions and listening first.
Thank you, Amy. That was good. That was good information. So I'm aware that both you and Jermaine need to jump off to other calls, and I just want to make sure that and I know that there's another question for you. So, but Jermaine, I didn't want to take the chance that you would have to leave us, and I didn't get a chance to thank you and to say we're so happy to have met you today, and we'll be very interested in getting any resources or information that you want to send us that we can share. So I'm not suggesting that it's time for you to leave. I just didn't want you to go away before I had a chance to say thank you. So,
Thank you so much.
we're going to go back to Amy's question, and I really do appreciate your time today and your sharing. That was enlightening, just very enlightening today. So thank you so much for that.
Amy, we just did have one more question for you. How do part-time and part-time seasonal employees fit into the FMLA picture? Do they qualify at all?
Muted.
I got you.
There we go. Okay. There is definitely considerations for part-time workers, but it is a prorated amount of time. So the whole 12 weeks of time and the 480 hours of time is prorated when they're part-time. So for FMLA, you have to be, and I learned this through a process actually probably 9 months ago, where FMLA, it's 50 employees or more, and that 50 is not just full-time, it does constitute part-time employees, because we had got conflicting advice on something and talked to a couple other attorneys, and we got a consensus and that it does constitute part-time as well. So make sure you're counting everyone correctly. So if someone's working 20 hours a week, they're 0.5 FTE, whereas normally someone who's 40 hours is 1 point. So you want to make sure if you have 2 people working 20 hours, that counts as 1 person. So you do have to include those folks there, and they do have ability to use FMLA time. So the Department of Labor has FMLA information on their site that it provides a really good resource that someone could delve into and ask questions on too, or see questions rather than see answers on too.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that's it, Valerie.
Alrighty, so Amy, I know that you also have to jump off. Jermaine apparently just left us, which I'm glad we got a chance to say goodbye. And
He's great.
He is great. Thank you so much for connecting us to him. We were really blown away by what he had to share, as with you. So I think that there's an awful lot of resources, an awful lot of information that we would love to have from both you and Jermaine. And so we'll look forward to receiving your presentation, and we'll share that out with our folks. So I appreciate your time. I know that this is a very busy time for you, certainly. And so as we're trying to gear back up and get people back on staff and hiring new folks and all of that, so I know that your expertise is quite valuable all the time, but certainly even more now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to wrap up here, and I want to, one more thing I'd like to share with you. You know that the City Council, Portsmouth City Council has appointed a Citizens Response Task Force on which I am sitting, and we're working very quickly, very hard to make sure that we are reviewing all of the opportunities for our businesses to be successful. So while we're focused primarily on the downtown restaurants and retailers and other businesses, and what we can do to get people up and running and out on the streets if necessary or if they want to be. So I've just sent out some surveys to our retail community and our restaurant community. And so if you get that, if you can respond as soon as possible, we're trying to move really quickly. We had a subcommittee meeting at 8:30 this morning. We have a full group meeting at 2:30 this afternoon. We have another meeting on Sunday. We're trying to move this really, really quickly so that we can get our businesses open to the best of your and our ability. So please, if you see those surveys, please respond to them. And this will be going on for some time so that we'll look at different industry segments as we can prioritize them. So please help us out. We need your help. I want to remind you that we have our resources for information, the portsmouthcollaborative.org and goportsmouthnh.com. Follow us on social and Facebook. Make sure you sign up for the City of Portsmouth Daily City Managers Advisory. Make sure we're washing our hands, wearing our masks, social distancing. That's how we're going to keep our businesses opening. And usually at the end of our chats, we really try to have you walk away with a smile or a giggle or a happy feeling. And Amy was good enough to share with us a little video. So this is comedian DJ Pryor, who has a riveting and hysterical conversation with his 19-month-old son. And it's good for a giggle, and I hope it sets you off just on a great note for the weekend. So have a great weekend, have a great week. We'll see you next Friday when we will have Police Chief Murner, Portsmouth City Police Chief Murner, and to talk about, there's a lot of things going on with the police forces right now. So he's going to come in and tell us about the change that he sees coming, the good things that the department has been doing and will continue to do. He's going to give us some insight on this controversy around policing. At the same time, we know that we had a great, and I think Jermaine referenced it, we had a great, safe, peaceful demonstration, protest last Sunday, and Joanna Kelly, was one of the organizers of that. And she worked very closely with the chief to make sure that it was safe and peaceful and successful. And so we're going to talk about that collaboration as well. I've invited Joe to join us on it as well. So please put it in your calendar to join us next Friday, the 19th, from 1 to 2. And in the meantime, enjoy this giggle. See you later. Thank you.
We need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah.
When the video is hung up, can you
right, don't bring that
stuff?
in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't right here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. Then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Thanks for loading that up for us, Ben, and thank you, Amy, if you're still here. Thank you for sending us that link. If any of you have any ideas about links that we can share in the future to make us all happy and smile and walk away ready for any adventure, please share. Thank you all for being here. See you later.